the top of the hour now, so I'd like to welcome to all the people who've just dialed in to our today's webinar, which is latest trends in performance management and quality, which I think is going to be a fascinating webinar, and I think one that hopefully will test your assumptions about what performance management and quality is and what we can do about it. So I'd like to introduce to you our two panelists. Delighted to welcome back to Dougie Cameron, who has spoken. I think this is your third webinar with us. Yeah. And Dougie, you've also started blogging recently on customer service issues. We've covered one or two of your articles. So are there any topics you're finding that you're sort of burning to write on in the future?
I think the one that I keep coming back to is about leadership. I think everything else that happens within the call center comes under the category of good or bad leadership, and so that's what I always come back to.
Okay, wonderful. And I understand that you started off life as an accountant and sort of went poacher turned gamekeeper. People aren't familiar with AdZest Consulting. Do you want to sort of give a short pen portrait of what you do and how you got there?
Yeah, I was an operations director at Sky. I ran workforce management, telephony, strategic planning, and a whole bunch of other outsourcing for the call centers. And I decided to set up myself, a bit of a lifestyle decision to do that and to control my own workload. And really it's focused on customer experience. So from before the customer has even thought they want to contact a business, right through to what happens after they've contacted the business, and then all the bits of the call center and retail as well, or face-to-face business, everything that interacts with the customer. How can we make that better to give the customer a great customer experience and keep coming back?
Wonderful. So I also like to introduce you for his first webinar, Justin Hamilton Martin from Ultracoms. And welcome to our webinar.
Thank you.
You've only been with Ultracoms for a relatively short period. You've been in the telecoms industry for sort of well in excess of 15 years, I understand.
That's right. I've been in the bandwidth and carrier market for a long time, and spent about 7 or 9 years running a hosted VoIP platform, delivering Centrex, IP Centrex services to enterprise customers across the UK. And took a little bit of time out after my business was sold back in 2012, and started here at Ultra in October.
Wonderful. And for people who've just seen your green logo for the first time and may not recognise Ultra from that logo, do you want to just give a short pen portrait about what the company is and how people may be more familiar?
Certainly. Well, so Ultra were the first cloud contact center provider in Europe, actually, in 2004. And the logo used to be a blue globe with a couple of arrows circling it.
Yes, indeed.
So, yeah, we've gone through a rebrand over the last few weeks to reflect more the responsive nature and the collaborative approach that we have with customers.
So people so historically the company was famous for its sort of hosted predictive dialer, but the product portfolio is much wider than that.
Yes, certainly. So exactly that. The company started in the predictive dialer space, and the team always believed that was the trickiest part and therefore the place to start, and then added in the inbound services as clearly customers needed to call back. So you make a predictive dial out. If you don't get through to someone or someone wants to call you back, you get an inbound call, and then by default you end up needing to blend calls. And so companies develop the portfolio in that area.
Okay, wonderful. Well, we're just going to run through a little bit of housekeeping for you. The slides are available in the chat room. You can leave your tips and questions in the chat room. And Dougie, if you could please pick a winning tip from that at the end of the webinar. We'll announce that probably about 3 o'clock today on Twitter. And a replay will be available later on today. And also, if you wanted a Ultra mug with a new logo on it, and this is an example of it here, if you'd just like to send in an email, including your postal address, to coffee@ultracom.com. Ultracoms. There's
an S, unfortunately, missing just before the dot.
Okay. In that case, we will not necessarily terribly error there, but I think you get the idea. Coffeeultracoms.com.
It's actually the other side of that one, John. I'm afraid.
Sorry.
The S needs to move a little bit further forward.
Okay. Operator. Is that it?
That's the one.
Okay. So if you'd like to, apologies for that, to coffeeultracoms.com, and we can then Justin will ensure that those are shipped out to you. So, which I think would be nice to drink your coffee out of. So if you're not already logged into the chat room, no commercial messages are allowed. Here's the address: callcenterhelper.com/chat, and you can download the slides from going in there. We've got quite a number of people who have just recently joined in. We've got Jenny from Newcastle in Time, Laura from Bucharest in Romania. We've got Jennifer who says she's in sunny Surrey. We've got Caroline in Trowbridge in Wiltshire. We've got Michael, got up very early, is dialed in from New York. We've got Lee in Edinburgh, so just up the road from you there, Dougie, and Claire in Halifax. So quite a number of people just piling into the chat room there. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to kick off the interactivity with a poll, and that poll will come up in the little in the window. It's not in the chat room. And the question is, how do you incentivize agents as part of performance management? So which incentives do you do? Do you have individual cash bonuses? Do you have group or team cash bonuses? Do you have non-cash bonuses, for instance, spot prizes or team meal experiences? Do you have time off, or do you not incentivize agents? You can select all that apply here. So if you have 3 of those apply for you, you can certainly select all those coming through. Dougie, what do you think is going to be the most popular one on this one?
I guess there's probably going to be we don't incentivize, and then a combination of individual and group cash bonuses, but that's a complete guess.
Okay, well, let's have a look at what the results are. So let's just share the results up there. So I think that was a bit of an each-way bet there, Dougie. So the overall bet you got there, yes, certainly 38% don't incentivize agents. 35% do have individual cash bonuses, but the winner is the non-cash bonus, a spot prize, a team meal, or some form of experiences. Quite interestingly, in terms of the cash bonuses, only 20% here have a team bonus, or group or team bonus based on cash. So maybe there's a trick, Justin, perhaps people are missing in terms of trying to build more team-based behaviours.
Yeah, absolutely. I think certainly in terms of creating competitive environments, if you're in an outcome-orientated sort of contact centre, certainly on the outbound side, team dynamics are very valuable, I think, in terms of driving performance.
Lisa said, we also recognise in a very public way great customer support. When users email us about a great experience, we announce it to the group, post it on overhead call board monitor, and put it to the shout-out bulletin board in our lunchroom, which I think is a nice touch. So I'd like to just drill down on those results a little bit, and I'd like to, since we're going to be looking at performance management quality, I'd like to ask if you could type into the chat room, in 1 or 2 words, what is your biggest problem with performance management and quality? So if you'd just like to type that into the chat room, what is your biggest problem with performance management and quality? So Jennifer says it's negative agents. Charlotte says it's consistency. Michael has said managers not doing periodic PM. Lisa says setting up a dedicated team to do monitoring. Mike has said supervisor buy into the QA program. Stuart has said consistency. Emma has said coaching, not knowing the difference between training and coaching. Jenny has said a lack of a quality function. Rochelle has said delivering feedback that agents respond to. Olive says balancing resources. Calibration between agent expectations and management view, says Laura. Philip says no quality monitoring. Jennifer says time and availability. Lee says staff attitude. Agents resistance, says Kasmoto. And Jennifer says a QA program not capturing opportunities. So we've got a kind of range there of sort of time constraints. Calibration seems to be quite a consistency, Dougie, across there. Do you see that calibration being a challenge?
Yeah, and I think it comes back to the point we were talking about earlier about how well people are trained to do these things. So one of the things I see quite a lot is the manager that's a bit chicken and are scared to have a tough conversation, and you see poor performers getting good scores and so on. So yeah, calibration definitely is trying to bring fairness into an imperfect process.
Wonderful. Well, I think one of the other ones was talked about is about training and coaching, getting the two of those confused. And I think that's probably the time at which we is probably worth handing across to Dougie and going through and looking at your presentation on this very subject. So, Dougie, if you'd like to get your slides up on your screen, and if you'd like to take us through your thoughts. So there we are. We see it there fine.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Jonty. I'll just recap if anyone missed the introductions. I'm Dougie, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you this afternoon my perspective on the current state of performance management. I'm going to cut to the chase right up front. In my opinion, performance management is the ultimate corporate paradox. And let me explain what I mean by that. Companies, rightly, are focused on continuous improvement. In reality, the performance management which they use as their tool for improvement is actually making their performance worse. And all of us are complicit in that failure by pretending not to know some key things about performance management. But before we get into all of that, let me first of all put my perspective in context. As we talked about before, if you missed it, I'm a gamekeeper turned poacher. I am a qualified accountant and I was a finance director before I became an operations director. I've run finance teams, I've been responsible for performance management teams and for performance management strategy, and I've led big operations, which has seen the best and the worst of ancients. I've also had the chance to work for some great companies such as Scottish Courage, Coca-Cola and B-Sky-B. And I've seen in these companies all kinds of people strategy, and I've seen bad performers turn good and good performers turn bad. So I believe that anything is possible. So let's move on. Let's start with two perspectives on performance management. The first is the classic textbook definition of performance management. It's not controversial. And indeed, I would call it a noble, no-brain kind of discipline. Who wouldn't want a process that ensures that employees contribute to the goals of the business? However, take the second quote. This is the reality. This is the difference between theory and execution. Perhaps no talent management process is more important or more reviled than performance management. That quote is the output from years of research of many users of performance management systems. I often hear the argument that some people will always hate performance management because they don't like having the performance managed. I'll argue that the evidence doesn't show that that's the case. So how on earth have we got ourselves into this situation where something that should be at the heart of a top performing business has got so dysfunctional? No, intuitively, but we instinctively. Number one, the performance management system is used to compensate for poor strategy. A clear bought-into strategy is magnetic. It draws employees to want to succeed. It helps inform the people specifications in the recruitment strategy, and it attracts the best people with the best skills for that strategic intent. In a well-led company, the role of the leader is to set the direction, provide the resources, and gently steer the ship towards its objective with an engaged crew who've got a full and clear understanding of where they're going. There's little need for performance management in a well-led company because performance comes from the simplicity of the clarity of purpose. On the other hand, performance needs to be managed in companies where the leaders have failed to fulfill their basic role to compensate for that failure. Whenever I see a poor performing agent, I look for one of three root causes. The first is inconsistency, and we've all seen this one. Today our focus is productivity. No, today the customer is the heart of everything we do. No, today credits are critical to our success. No NPS, no cost, no first call resolution. No, we meant customer all along. Call it flavour of the month, short-termism, reprioritization, or whatever. Inconsistency kills performance because it confuses the team. Secondly, poor direction. What actually is our objective, and does everyone understand it, believe it, live it, and breathe it? A strategy that's been wordsmithed by the executive in a boardroom is destined to become as irrelevant as a pizza plate with an inspirational message that's been stuck in the wall of the canteen. It just doesn't connect. And finally, poor recruitment. Ultimately, people make a contact center business. They're the heart and soul. Just make do recruitment or rush recruitment puts square pegs in round holes and destines the business and performance to go off the rails. Part of a great strategy is defining the right people for the job and how to keep a hold of them. People come to work despite what people think to do a bad job. Bad strategic leadership, however, makes that inevitable. So using performance management to drive performance is no substitute for great strategic direction. Which leads me on to number 2. Performance management done normally usually involves the dreaded big meeting, whether that's quarterly, half-yearly, or annually. Performance management therefore becomes a big thing sometimes, but not always. How often have we heard my number one most hated phrase in business? I will pick that up at their appraisal. No, that is setting the individual, the leader, and the company to fail, not to succeed. Performance management has to be lived and breathed, and Justin will touch on this later. Take, for example, NPS. I most often see NPS results published at the end of the week. This means that the agent gets surprises, struggles to recall the conversation, and the moment for instant improvement is lost. Why does the agent not get the feedback as soon as it's available, meaning that it's fresh in their memory, it's real life, and there's a real world customer, and the leader can give feedback to give the maximum benefit? Otherwise, if it's not real time, NPS scoring is a slightly detached tick boxing exercise. If, as we should assume, the customer is always right, then the agent, leader, and company should be learning, evolving, and improving every second of every day rather than following a corporate reporting timetable. The world no longer works in batch jobs, and neither should performance management. And part of the reason that we're stuck in that batch job existence is the third thing that we're pretending not to know, that leaders love a process, they're not so keen on conversations. I can say with some certainty that I've worked with many leaders who will spend more time discussing the performance management process than they will have coaching conversations. And as we saw in the article earlier, that makes sense because people are busy. Of course they are. It's a busy time. The performance review table needs to be set and diarised, calculations need to be done, cross-team calibration needs to happen, grading and salary increment strategy needs to be set, salary review files need to be uploaded and checked, and all of that has to be done within a budget. That makes me sad. It's the ultimate inside-out thinking. The performance management machine has swallowed up all the time that should be invested in good coaching and feedback. And underprepared, or lazy, or unskilled, or chicken leaders have colluded to allow that to happen. Nowhere is there clearer evidence that performance management is a process more focused on ticking boxes than actually improving the performance, the individual, the team, or the company. I've touched the link to reward already, so let's stick with that for item number 4. Incentives get results, but at an intended cost. Often when a company hits performance difficulties or it wants to supercharge its performance, it looks at incentivization. It was Peter Drucker who said, what gets measured gets managed. The extension of that, theoretically, is that what gets incentivized gets improved. I call bull on that. What gets incentivized gets focused on. It will likely improve, but often with unintended consequences. Let me give you an example. Several years ago, I was working with one of the world's most famous management consultancies as a client. After benchmarking, we decided that we needed to improve our productivity by 5 percentage points to match the best in class. As is so often the case with the consultancy, we decided to incentivize so that everyone could benefit from the upside. After a couple of weeks, it became clear that the incentive was so heavily geared towards a really aggressive productivity target that we needed an exception process to make it fair. Then it became clear that because the incentive was important to people, so was getting the exceptions and the appeals right to feel fair. Then we had to start scheduling time for appeals. And at the 6-month review, it was absolutely clear that the productivity that we had targeted had improved a bit, so yay to us. However, and it's a big unintended however, when the time required to administer the system was taken into account, we were actually less productive overall. It was a really important lesson to me that stuck. Yes, an incentive can shift the performance of any single number, but if the incentive is the only thing that changes, then a problem of at least equal size will pop up elsewhere. It's a classic game of whack-a-mole.
And I guess the consultants weren't targeted on the productivity saving then, so they still got their fee and went on to another project.
Exactly. When you deal with these big American consultancies, they are on a fixed fee or fixed downside. Time always moves on. Finally, and this is the crux of the matter for me, is that a vast amount of resource goes into giving an agent a performance score or a grading. However, a score is a label at a point in time, and it doesn't motivate anyone. In fact, evidence shows that it cheeses off those with the lowest scores and demotivates them, and it breeds a complacency in the highest performers that may not have to try so hard to do well. It certainly isn't a driver of performance in itself. So the performance management process, despite all the efforts and angst that goes into it, is actually not that great a tool for motivating people to improve performance. Listen for a second to what Edward Deming said about performance ratings in the early 1980s. The merit rating leaves people bitter, crushed, bruised, battered, desolate, despondent, dejected, feeling inferior, some even depressed, unfit for work for weeks after receipt of a rating, unable to comprehend why they are inferior. I doubt that any of these words are words that we would aspire to for our teams, yet 35 years later we're still blindly investing in performance management gradings and we expect different results. Therefore, as things stand, I've painted a fairly dark picture. Why do we bother? Well, the reason that we should bother is that performance is important. It's the secret sauce that makes the difference between a thriving business and a demotivated crew rapidly abandoning their sinking ship. Bad performance management has a cost. That cost is motivation, and as motivation wanes, so does performance, and our employees vote with their feet. A business hemorrhaging staff normally makes some pretty dumb recruitment decisions in haste, and so the process begins again. It's a downward spiral to the bottom. However, it doesn't need to be like that. Although we've focused on the process, the systems, and the box ticking, we've become focused on the process, the systems, and the box ticking, one element of performance management is proven to work: feedback. A study in 2011 allowed participants to choose how they divided their time between 4 tasks. The feedback for each task was either immediate or sporadic, or it was precise or vague. The study found that the participants devoted most of their time to the tasks that had an instant and specific feedback, and more importantly, they performed better at them. It's not rocket science, but deeper analysis of the study concluded that the participants performed better with high-quality feedback because they paid more attention to those tasks and they knew what was expected of their performance. Now, I don't know about you, but when I think back on my leadership development, it was spent in understanding the bureaucracy and the form filling and not where it really counts: high-quality feedback and coaching. So just to boil that down into a few points, if what we do now isn't great performance management, what does great performance management look like? The first is it's not a score. It really isn't about a score. All these points in the slides are important, but if you could change just one thing, I would urge you to do away with the grading system and to break the link to financial reward. The second thing is to think of performance not as a meeting or a system. It's about continuous real-time feedback. It's not about waiting for something or ticking a box or uploading or anything like that. It's about conversations. It's about consistent positive reinforcement of a magnetic corporate vision. Let me put that another way. It's about being a role model of the corporate vision. That's what leaders should be doing. And most of all, it's about authentic, timely conversations based on the big picture. The big picture is the company vision. I'm going to leave you with 3 last thoughts. Undoubtedly, we're putting a lot of effort into performance management. However, our performance management systems are letting our companies and our employees down. In fact, in a 2010 survey, 58% of companies surveyed rated their own performance management systems as a grade C or below. It's the ultimate irony for me. They fail their own test. Performance management, as it stands, is just plain broke. Second thing is that we're stuck in a downward spiral, and more of the same isn't the answer. We need to break the habit that we've got into. And the third thing is that the answer is not, as people often say to me, is it the carrot or the stick? It's not. It's neither the carrot or the stick. It's in genuine, honest human interactions. That's what drives performance. I'm conscious that's been quite a big download on the dynamic world of performance management, and I hope that everyone's been able to take at least something from my alternative perspectives on what I find certainly is a fascinating area. So thank you for your patience, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Dougie. Quite fascinating, that statistic that most people rank their performance management systems a bit like my A-level results the first time round, which was grade C or below. So a couple of key points on that one. Coaching, not telling, I think is very important. Do away with the grading system. I think when I did the last poll on it, about 72% of people use a scoring system, percentage scoring system. So Doug's advice to do away with that. And it's about timely conversations. What I'd like to do now is I'd just like to drill down on one of those points about the coaching, coaching not telling element that Dougie talked about. And just like to put up a poll, and that is, what percentage of your performance management sessions is actually spent on coaching? Rather than just sort of necessarily telling or instructing? Is it between 0 to 9%, 10 to 19%, 20 to 39%, 40 to 59%, or is it 60% plus? So if you just like to vote on those figures there here. I've got no idea on what the results of this one come out. Instinctively, my feeling is somewhere around 20%. Dougie, sort of, would you think that's in the right ballpark?
I think so. I have no idea.
Well, let's have a look, and we'll have a look at the results. Well, we've got 16% in the 0 to 10% category, 22% in the 10 to 19%. We've got 18% on the 20 to 39% category. The majority there is.
Sorry to interrupt, John. So we can't see the poll results.
Here we go. Sorry, forgot one button. Yeah. So in the 0 to 10%, we have 16%. 10 to 90%, we have 22%. 20 to 39, we have 18%. 40 to 59, we have 34%. And 60% plus, we have 10%. So it looks like the biggest cluster there is around the 50% mark. But if you actually add the figures together, we've still got 56%, 56% there, below 40% time spent on coaching. So I think there's some encouraging elements there, but I think there's still quite a room for improvement, Dougie. Have we lost Dougie there?
Yeah, sorry, I was muted there. Yeah, I completely agree, and I think I think that's a good intention. My other concern would be back to our point earlier, which was what actually is coaching when it comes down to individual leaders, as opposed to what our intent is. Is it as high as that? And I don't know. It's certainly not worth the feedback I've seen.
So some quite interesting findings there. So it'd be interesting if anyone's got experience of what they're doing in their sessions, if they'd like to put that into the chat room. Justin, does these results tie in with your thoughts?
I think they're really encouraging, actually. I guess the other question is how much time is spent doing performance management sessions, and how regular, frequently are they? So that would be an interesting statistic to build into that. But clearly, there's a lot of good time being spent in coaching. which is very encouraging.
Okay, excellent. Well, we're now going to jump across to the chat room and see what top tips and questions are coming through. So, Devon, I guess it's been pretty busy as ever on the chat room. What have you got for us?
Yeah, we've had a very busy chat room today, so thank you, everybody. Our first tip today comes in from Mike, and he says, start engaging new hires while still in training. Our QA department does a complete overview, including going over the quality criteria and calibrating a call while they are still in training. Dougie, do you think this is a good idea?
I think we may have...
Yeah, I do. I think it's a great idea. I'm on now. I think it's a great idea, and I think what I would encourage everyone to do is have a look at a company called Zappos, who are an American internet shoe retailer owned by Amazon now, and their onboarding process is absolutely fantastic. And what they do at the end of it is they offer people cash to leave, which really shows that people are committed to working for the team. So I think that is exactly when we need to capture people and really engage them.
Brilliant, thank you for that. Our next tip today comes in from Leslie, and it says, we complete calibration as part of our regular weekly TL meetings. We select random calls and review them as a group. I've worked on building trust and honesty between the team leaders to provide us with the best platform from which to start the calibration sessions. We've got another tip in from Mike again that says, build a relationship between your supervisors and your quality department. This helps avoid appeals and presents a united front to the agents. We have a question now from Charlotte that says, the general consensus in our centre is that the top management's way of dealing with performance issues is extremely archaic, praise the top 1% and berate the lower 99%, and does nothing for our already low morale. Understandably, this is an awkward thing to broach as they are the top management in the centre. How would everyone else deal with this? I think this would be a good question to throw back into the chat room, but also, Dougie, do you have any advice for Charlotte?
Yeah, I do. And having been a director myself and knowing directors, sometimes top leaders don't know things. And it sounds like a really bizarre thing, but sometimes things hit you in the face like a wet fish when somebody actually says something. So I think there's a way to build a story and actually say it out loud. And I think sometimes that's received better than people think it will be.
Justin, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the most important thing in my mind is stating your intention. If the intention is to help the business move forward, and you're not using sort of the generalization of you always this or we're always doing that, and you split the content of the actual conversation with the behaviors that you've observed, and then look at the impact, that's a rational way of dealing with it, and that ought to go down well.
Indeed, so quite a tricky one. Devon, what's the next one?
We have a tip in now from Jennifer that says, keep coaching positive to a degree. Everything is always so negative, so always talk about what they have done well. Ask their opinion of what they think they could improve on and work together to find a way they can do this. That's a brilliant tip. Well done, Jennifer. From Emma, she says, always make sure your coaches know what they are doing. Make sure you PM them more. They are the people that drive the performance of the rest of your staff. Stuart says, make sure your whole approach to performance management is aligned to a wider customer experience strategy and employee engagement program. Employees can then see the bigger picture and are more likely to buy in. The approach of happy employees, happy customers is really true, and when employees can see how they are contributing to the bigger picture, I have found that the barriers to giving and receiving feedback are overcome far more easily. Dougie, do you like this tip?
Completely, yeah. I think you have to take a holistic approach to these things, and I can't remember who it was that said it, but somebody said, treat your employees as well as your customers, and maybe even better. And I think that's true.
Great, thank you. Jackie says, your coaches need to coach at all levels and where appropriate in a visible area where all employees can see. And finally for this section, Mike again says, focus on the positive, build your agents up, do not tear them down. Thank you, everyone. Back to you, Jonty.
Thank you very much for that. And Justin, I think it's sort of accentuate the positive seems to be the key one. I just like the one about making the coaching visible, sort of rather than shutting yourself in a room. If you can be positive, doing that in a more public area.
I think that's a great idea, actually. I think a lot of people fear receiving feedback because they think it's going to be a negative experience, and if it's done properly, it should be a good opportunity to build on what's been done in the past and focus on what everyone's collaboratively trying to achieve in the future. So, yeah, making it visible, making sure that people come in and out of a room starting, with a level of anxiety probably by default, the fact they're going through some sort of review, and then making sure that when they leave the room, they're not in pieces, and you've actually added some value in their life rather than taken from them. That's got to be good.
Wonderful. Well, thank you.
One of the things I've seen along that theme that I really like is a team calibration kind of thing, a peer calibration, where peers review calls with each other. And there's a really non-threatening technique to do called appreciative inquiry, which is it's two statements: what I really appreciate about that is, and what could be even better is. And it's from a positive viewpoint. And if you're getting that from your peers, I think it's a really strong coaching tool.
Indeed, wonderful. Well, we're going to thank you very much for that, Devon. We're just going to jump across to the next section, where Justin Hamilton-Martin from Ultracoms will be talking through about performance, quality, and productivity. So if we just pop the slides up onto Justin's machine, and Justin, just put those up, and if you can go to your first slide, and then we can take us through your thoughts.
Good, thank you very much, Jonty. Thanks for taking the time this afternoon to join us, everyone. So just to give you a quick snapshot of Ultracoms for those of you who are not so familiar with us. So they started in the cloud sorry, John.
If you keep on going.
So it started life in 2004, about 11 years ago, and started initially with outbound services, blended inbound services then came through second. The company's based down in Fareham, down in Hampshire, a very leafy part of the world, and the cloud that we operate is actually out of 3 data centers. Got an in-house development team, and typically our customer profile is above 20 contact center agents through to several hundreds, is a sort of a general sweet spot for us, if you like. Today I'm going to be talking about performance in the contact center, and that's both, I guess, customer experience in terms of results and the cash performance. So I've got a few strategies that we're seeing as quite popular and can certainly derive good results. And the first is about staying in control of the calls. As an organisation that's started in the outbound world, we see there being a great opportunity to convert inbound inquiries into outbound calls to do 3 things really. One is to make sure that you can manage pressure on the contact center with regards to inbound calls by taking things into your own hands, allowing customers to opt out of queues, perhaps in the first 5 seconds, and then actually making a call back, matching the outbound agent or the advisor that's got the right skills to actually perform the task and the request that the inbound call has made. Is a really good way of staying in control, and that ultimately leads to lower costs and better experience. And it also allows you to plan the call, do research, and stay in control. So increase satisfaction and enhance performance. To illustrate that, I've got a sort of funnel here, if you like, with regards to inquiries and process. So by default, you'll drop a contact center solution over the top of your entire organization, and you'll want to move either tickets through a process or sales through a process, or whatever your metric is that you're looking to drive. And then you've got the turnaround triggers, as I call them, which are either web leads, callbacks being requested, SMS requests, some sort of automation perhaps behind that, email inquiries, and CRM processes that you need to cover off. What we're seeing also is as the inquiry works its way through the funnel as such, it could be that an escalation is occurring as you get closer to resolution. If you can't resolve it at first line, it gets escalated. But it might be that if it's an outbound data cleansing activity in the outbound environment, as you get through to actually closing a deal, passing it through to project management, you need more specialist skills. What we're seeing is that deeper into the contact center, there's this transition between the dialer users or the inbound contact center users switching across into the CRM users. And then what we're seeing is that there are different environments that are being called upon. So predictive lists for over dialing and making sure that you can drive efficiencies, progressive lists for making sure you maintain a one-to-one relationship. So maybe those aren't your bronze leads are the predictive perhaps, and your silver leads would be your progressive. Automated callbacks to make sure you actually get round to those inquiries, or if someone's had a smooth queue and you've just got to get back to them as quickly as possible, then you can just automatically get back onto the outbound call knowing which number they came in on. Keeps you in control. And finally, for the contact center users, the preview records. So for us, these are all different lists that we populate through different media types. And then in the back office, and for these more highly skilled and higher paid people, quite often, we're seeing a lot of click to dial from CRM requirements. So I guess that first tip really is more control equals fewer resources being paid for and used in the contact center and lines, increased satisfaction and enhanced performance. Moving into the second piece of that puzzle is around KPIs. A few years ago, people used to talk to me about contact centers needing daily reports in their inbox. I think that was one of the key requirements, that the email had to occur so that Monday morning you had last week's performance and etc. What we're seeing now is KPIs being here and now. And the reason that's valuable is it allows that real-time decision making, and the technology is now available for it. So some of you may have this, but you can then map resource levels between the teams, departments, and sites. You can organize list management. Is my list working if it's an outbound campaign, or do I retire it? What is my contact rate, for example? And then there's an opportunity to take the performance of an individual at a very quantifiable, factual level down to agent and teams. And that allows people ultimately to better manage and measure achievements and performance. So I think, Jonty, we've got a poll coming in here.
Yes, we do indeed, and very much around that point on KPIs, and it also ties in with Doug's point on KPIs. Do you provide real-time KPIs to agents or other advisors today? So the answer is yes, we provide real-time KPIs to agents and advisors today, or we have this today and we want to remove it. We're looking to do this in the future, or we don't see any value in this. So if you'd just like to vote on that, whether you have it today, whether you're looking at it in the future, whether you're looking to remove it, or if you don't see any value on that. So let's have a look at the results up on the screen and share that with you. About 50% of the audience have it today, and 47% looking at the future. Good news, just in only 3% don't see any value in that. So looks like real-time feedback is a hit, if you like, from our audience.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's good to see that is the case, and I'm absolutely sure that is right on point for the marketplace. And I know as vendors that that's important to us as well as the other colleagues that we have in the industry. Yeah. So in terms of moving into the next piece for driving performance, this is really about deploying the right technology and making sure that it's a single joined-up solution. I know that some organizations or vendors will say that you have to have a single omnichannel solution from one vendor. I think there's a good alternative really, which is to work with best of breed vendors with an open mindset to APIs. Any other solution is going to generate long-term pain. And I think going back a few years, people used to buy different components and then hope that they're going to work together. But now we are seeing some of those pains starting to come to the front. if you look here, and I've got a quick jigsaw puzzle of the various components, and there's been a lot of discussion already in the chat room about QM, quantity management, but I believe that good open APIs, particularly if you're a cloud vendor, are absolutely essential, because you've got to work with existing phone systems, you've got to work with different platforms, you've got to be able to create a joined up journey. And I think our role as vendors in the marketplace is to make sure that that actually gels through, and that people who are running these contact centers, like those potentially listening today, need to be able to then ask questions from the vendors and get the right answers. So in terms of the outbound marketplace, it's getting quite tricky actually for you. You've got obligations around PCI DSS, payment security is getting tougher. The guys who offer these payment solutions, whether it's Visa or MasterCard, etc., they started looking at the largest organizations, and they're working their way down through the marketplace to slightly smaller organizations. And then we've got the FCA looking at financial compliance, and there are organizations needing to provide all kinds of proof about what the agents are actually doing, what the advisors are doing. And there's a real challenge there around the technology. And then also you've got Ofcom who are looking to protect the end users, people who get called by equipment from the likes of us as a vendor. And AMD is one of those interesting subjects. Answer machine detection, particularly in the outbound environment, creates delay in call connections in most scenarios. We've seen it generating lead wastage and false positive measurement. But I'd be interested in seeing how many people are actually still out there using that kind of technology.
Okay, we're going to jump across, and the poll is, what is your view about using answer machine detection in your contact center? The answers are, we currently use it, we used to use it and have dropped it, we're looking for it at the future, we won't use it, or we've got no need for it as we don't do outbound calls. So if you'd just like to vote on answer machine detection, we currently use it, we used it and dropped it, we're looking at it in the future, we won't use it, or we've got no need for it as we don't make outbound calls. So let me share the results with on the screen here. It's quite an interesting one. I've never done this particular poll before. 14% currently use it, 5% used to use it, 11% are looking at it in the future. 16% won't use it, and 54% have got no need. So this, just now, it's quite a wide span there.
It's quite interesting. So if you we don't do outbounds, 54%. So suggesting that most of these the vast majority are handling inbound services. But then of those who actually are involved in outbound, it's quite a large proportion actually who are still using it.
Yeah,
that's very interesting.
I'd certainly that sort of surprised me in terms of the percentages using it there. So. Okay,
so the survey being conducted by Ofcom, there's going to be some interesting findings from that. So the next piece I have about driving down costs is really to make every call count. It's been a principle that I've lived by during my career, and every interaction is an opportunity to learn something or confirm information about a customer or a prospect. And whether that's information that you're going to use during that phone call or perhaps later on, it's certainly useful to collect it. So something we're seeing mixed views on in terms of scripting is certainly in the outbound contact center world. We're seeing a lot of scripts being used. But also in the CRM environment, we're seeing components of scripts being used with regards to compliance. And just to build on this point, we're also seeing a lot of requirement and discussion around better list management, such that when people are speaking to users, that they're actually collecting metadata in order to be able to capture that information. And then we're seeing also the requirement for the CRM system to pass that information back into the list. So again, this comes back to my point about well-integrated contact center technology with the CRM. So the point there is make every call count. That's really a good way of bringing down costs and driving performance. So I was asked about where opportunities could be seen to improve productivity. And picking up on that theme around various compliance obligations, we're seeing departments growing around compliance across our customer base, whether it's the FCA, Ministry of Justice, the IPA, insolvency piece there, or PCI DSS. It's becoming very difficult for contact centers to operate and to be efficient and to really deliver. The technology is certainly being stretched. So something that we've been discussing with a number of customers, and I'll be interested in getting a poll on this in a minute, but we're seeing CRM and component scripting as being essential to be compliant. And my question is, can meta tagging and snippets drive training and compliance? So linking back into what Dougie was talking about earlier about best practice and coaching. So on the back of the integration of call recording, screen recording capability, are we able to therefore take information from records through the list management and then across into the call recordings and the screen recordings? And are we able to use triggers from the CRM to actually deal with the compliance obligations? And that's an interesting question for you. What would that really look like? If you've got a call recording with a start time and an end time, you may have an initial rapport build that you'd be interested in understanding in the first part of the call, especially during the training process that being talked about earlier. You then have perhaps a project that you'd introduce in the second slice of the phone call, and then in a charity fundraising environment, for example, you may have your first ask, how would you like to offer £10 a month via direct debit? We've probably all been on those calls. Or the second ask, maybe £5, and then perhaps you close it. As a salesperson, now the direct debit piece is the bit that you actually want to attempt to snip out, as well as the introduction piece. And naturally, automatically, by using a script or CRM, capturing the start and the end point of a snippet, I believe could be a very interesting alternative to perhaps converting everything into speech analytics. And also, if you look at a tagging report, you'd say in the orange or amber components there, that the direct debit compliance piece may take you 6 or 5 seconds if your name is Jason or Flavia, but we know that the minimum time it takes to go through the direct debit script is 10 seconds. So from a quality management perspective, of my 94 calls, have I only review 11 of those in terms of achieving the compliance tick in the box. So speech recognition certainly has a place to play, a part to play. Potentially, let's use the speech analytics against the snippets rather than against the entire call, depending how you're using it. And it is horses for courses on this one. And I can see that transcribing calls does add value, and we have customers using it. Retrospective data mining can be expensive, and educating the systems can be quite tricky. But what are the alternatives? This is something that customers are asking me on a regular basis. So I have another question for you.
Okay, wonderful. So the question for you is, do you automatically meta tag data in calls today? So I'll just put that up on. And if people aren't familiar with the topic meta tag, this is scanning by something like speech analytics or capturing this in the CRM system.
Yeah, this is taking triggers from a CRM or from a script and actually placing the timer into the phone call recording, and then using that slice of the phone call to then do this transcription. So I'm only interested in transcribing the bits that are relevant to that section.
Okay, well, let's have a look at the results we've got from that. 31% of the audience are doing this today. 19% say this could address some issues we have, and 50% don't currently see a requirement for that. So quite a range, but it looks like half the audience are either doing it or see value from that. So that I think is quite a positive one there. So Justin, what are your sort of concluding thoughts?
Really, I think the most interesting part there for me is the fact that the KPIs are either already in place at an individual level, or pretty much everyone's planning it. Whether the right technology is in place today to do that, I'm not sure. With various organisations I'm speaking to, I'm finding perhaps more people in the latter camp, or people who want to do it, but also I'm seeing that absolute demand for open APIs, and people don't want to quite often invest in transitioning from various components overnight and just changing out their entire solution. They want to do it in components within budget. So open APIs is the way forward.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to jump across to Devon on the chat room, which seems to be humming as ever. Devon, what tips and questions have you got for us there?
Okay, so we're going to start with an opinion now from Leslie that says, my frontline advisors don't have any KPIs. They are encouraged to focus on the customer and resolving their issue. Justin, what do you think about this one?
I think that's really important. KPIs don't suit everyone and don't suit every single team, clearly. I do think that it's interesting that if we can convert those inbound call inquiries to outbounds by essentially offering people to come out of the queue and call back, I think that's a very good alternative to driving customer experience and getting the right agent onto that phone call and planning it. So even if you keep the customer waiting perhaps for a call back for a minute or two, just that minute to 2 minutes of planning can really change the experience for the customer, rather than making sure as an SLA that you answer your phone call within 5 rings, I think was the number that's been picked.
Brilliant, thank you. Jennifer says, we often have to mark down a call for it not being professional language, but overall, if it doesn't affect the customer's experience, should it be marked down? Justin, do you want to answer this one?
Yeah, I don't think I think if you've got a phone call that wasn't a good experience, that's one sort of filter that you can have on it, but this really comes back to the coaching piece around professional language, I think, rather than trying to collect metadata for compliance or training.
And I think Jennifer probably has answered her own question here, because I think, Jennifer, if you're asking this question, you probably are feeling that your quality system is not working the way you ought to do it. So my advice to Jennifer would be go by the courage of your convictions and go and challenge the process if you don't think this is right. Dougie, is that your thoughts as well?
Yeah, I think for me it's who is to be the judge of what's professional language. So if the call has been scored highly by the customer, then that agent did exactly what they were supposed to do, which was find the customer at their level and satisfy their whatever they called for. So I'm with Jennifer, thumbs up on standing up for that one.
Brilliant, thank you for that. A tip from Charlotte says, ensure that those who are improving and still not necessarily perfect are also recognised and praised for their efforts in order to keep pushing them towards their full potential, rather than only recognising those already at peak levels of performance. A tip says, part of our coaching session is to always make agents know that coaching isn't all about pointing out where the agent has gone wrong. It includes points on where they've grown since the last session and how they're now ready to improve even more. It turns a negative meeting into a positive session. Dougie, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I mean, one of the things I am also an executive coach as well as the other things that I do, and what I often do with people is have a timeline and basically say not a timeline actually. What does 10 look like out of 10, and when do you hope to be there, and put a time on it, and then that becomes and also talk about what does 10 look like, what does it look and feel like, and then every coaching conversation is against that benchmark, and then you can put a date on it and see progress or going backwards, because you can't avoid difficult conversations, but I think it's great to look at the journey forwards rather than picking at the bones of something that's happened.
Perfect.
I think we've got time for 2 more tips, Devon, if you want to.
Okay, that's fine. We have a tip in now from Stuart that says, breaking quality measures down can address specific focus areas for agents. For example, split call accuracy from customer service. Someone could be great at one but awful at the other. This way you can still give praise but also address the development needs. And finally today, from Melinda, says, our upper management takes time each week to listen to calls with the QA manager and operation manager. The VP will send out shout-out emails to agents. The whole leadership team presents a certificate and gift card to the individual agents. Back to you, John T.
Wonderful. I love that one, Justin. I think that ties in very nicely of gathering very public recognition.
Yeah, it's very good. There's some great good best practice being shown, isn't there?
It is indeed. So we just unfortunately run out of time for today. So if in the chat room you could say in 1 or 2 words, what did you like best about the webinar? So if you could type that into the chat room. Slides are also available on Call Center Helper, and you can watch a replay. I know a lot of you like to time shift these. callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars. That should be online from about 3 o'clock. And just like to thank you to our 2 speakers today. Dougie, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And Justin Hamilton-Martin, thank you indeed for being on today's webinar. And just a reminder, if you'd like an UltraComs mug, if you'd like to send an email to coffee@ultracoms.com, which is the correct email address. If you put your postal address, then just to ensure that gets sent out to you.
I certainly will. Thank you very much, John.
Indeed. And thank you to the whole audience for joining us. And we're taking a break next week, and we'll be back in 2 weeks' time looking at the future of customer service. Thanks, goodbye to everyone, and hope you have a nice day. Bye-bye.